لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وتم التسليمات على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله بن عبد المطلب وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين وبعد. So I'm very honored to be back here at Seekers Hub. We did a Ramadan program also last year, I think for a few nights as well. And it's always a pleasure to come back and address the people of the believers and the brothers and sisters of Mississauga as usual. So the suggestion going along with the theme so far, the fruits of faith or the fruits of Iman, is to cover a few of the abwab of the chapters from the seminal book of Imam Al-Ansari Al-Harawi, entitled Manazil al-Sa'irin, or the stations of the Wayfarers. And one of the beautiful things about this work is he takes you basically on a path from Bab al-Yaqadha ila Bab al-Tawheed, from the first book, which is called, or the first chapter, which is called Awakening, to the last chapter, which is called Tawheed, and then everything in between. And the idea is, it's premised that who we are and what dictates our deeds and our acts and the things that we say have an origin within our internal states. And so when an angry word comes out, it's not really just an angry word, but it came about because there was a state of anger that preceded it, or that precipitated it. And then some type of infi'al, right, some type of reaction came about because of that. When a pleasant word comes out also, or a pleasant deed or a pleasant act, right? You do something that you felt inspired to do. Well, that inspiration also has an origin within one's internal state. And so then the question becomes, are these internal states just sort of random set of events? So I'll do good things depending upon my mood, and if I'm in a bad mood, I instruct everybody in my family and the community, don't stay away from me today, I'm in a bad mood. Not sure what's going to happen because, it's not feeling right inside. So it's just kind of, we have no control over that. It just comes and goes like the wind, and we don't really have recourse to somehow structure these internal states. Or is there a manhaj, right? Is there a methodology, is there a program that one could possibly try to pursue that can go a long ways towards rectifying these internal states? Right? The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ لَمُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. In the body there is a morsel of flesh. If it becomes rectified, everything else becomes rectified. If it becomes corrupted, everything else becomes corrupted. This morsel of flesh is the heart, right? And as the fuqaha say, they don't mean the heart as sambori. They don't mean the heart that's the actual physical organ, but they mean the heart that is from the al-madda al-latifa, right? From that which is of the malakut, from that which is of another realm, the heart that feels, the heart that can be inspired, and the heart, they say, is mahal nazarillah, that is the receptacle of the divine gaze. إن الله لا ينظر إلى صوركم ولا أعمالكم أو أجسادكم في رواية ولكن ينظر إلى قلوبكم. Allah does not gaze upon your outward forms, but rather His gaze is focused upon the internal state, the heart. So the heart is where it all happens. This is where the intention comes in. This is where motivations come about. This is where we can feel inspired to do things. This is where we can feel maybe not so much inspired to do things. And so working on that aspect of who we are will affect everything else, and ultimately will be much more sustainable for a practice of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So while much emphasis has been put upon what the Prophet ﷺ said and what he did as the sunnah or as the normative sunnah, part of that is, well, what are the prophetic states? What are the ahwa? What are the maqamat? What are the fruits of this process that we call as-sayr wa suluk, or suluk, right? Sometimes it's called sayr, sometimes it's called suluk. As-sa'irun ilallah, those who are going towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As-salik, the one who is forging a path towards Allah. And Allah is not in a physical place, obviously. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala munazzih an al-zaman wal-makan wa ma yushbih al-hawadith itlaqan. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't resemble anything of the creatures that He created. So He is neither in a place, a physical place, or in a physical time, but He transcends all of that. He is not applicable, all of those things to Him. So when we say journeying or wayfaring towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not a physical space you're traversing, but it is the space of the both internal and external obstacles that will get in your way to have a greater understanding and realization of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there are internal ones and there's external ones. The external ones, ad-dunya wa shaitan. Dunya, right? The kind of the social aspect of us striving for things that are of a fleeting nature, based upon what we observe and see from other people who we consider to be our peers and our neighbors. Oh, he got a new Lexus, I want to get one too. They just got a new house or condo in this nice area of town, and oh, I think I should be striving for that. And this is a tanafus, right? Competing in things of dunya. It's an obstacle, actually, to having a greater understanding and ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With shaitan, maybe asar, right? Satan himself is not going to be remiss and negligent in trying to coax you and using your own internal folly to get you to do the things that he wants, which is basically to do anything that's a mukhalafa, anything that contravenes the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But generally it's acknowledged that the greater obstacles are the internal ones, your own self. أعد عدوك نفسك التي بين جنبيك كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Your worst enemy is the nafs, right? Is the ego that is between your two sides. That's your worst enemy. وَالنَّفْسُ أَخْبَثُ مِنْ سَبْعِينَ شَيْطَانًا. And the nafs, the ego, is more corrupt and despicable than 70 devils, than 70 satans. And Ramadan in particular, one of the major themes of it, it is a institution, it is a madrasa, it's a 4-week, 1 month long dawrah or course to traverse the obstacles of the nafs. It's a training. It's tadrib, right? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may find taqwa. So fasting is one of the prescriptions, right? One of the prescriptions for getting over the obstacle of the soul, getting over the obstacles of the ego and of narcissism and of preferring oneself over others and the shahawat, the desires of food and drink and things like this. So when this is the case, Ramadan is there to help us, train us to do that. And there are other things, right? Even the 5 prayers, all of the sunnah, all of the ritual ibadat of the sunnah are really wasa'il. They are means towards doing that, towards getting in that place. So Islam is not just a laundry list of do's and don'ts. It's not a check-off list, right? It's not an app you can get on your phone, and then when you've prayed on time, you check it off, and then you've done everything you're supposed to do. That's certainly an aspect of it, but kind of the lub, or the inner essence of the deen, is really cultivating the inner life, cultivating these inner states. All right, in the khutbah today in Brampton, I talked a little bit, we're seeing a lot of these high-profile or from celebrity type of people, suicides. Yesterday, the very famous CNN program person and cook and chef, Anthony Bourdain, apparently committed suicide. A few days before that, Kate Spade, who probably the ladies know more than the men, the one who did the handbags and accessories and things like that, also committed suicide. And the interesting thing, I shouldn't say interesting, but kind of the the thing, al-mulfit lil-nazar, that you could take a look at is, it seemed to be that these people, in terms of dunya, in terms of what people actually strive for, which is money and wealth and prestige and status and recognition and sense of accomplishment, they had all those things, right? And they were actually at the pinnacle, the peak, in their respective realms and perspective of professions or walks of life. But yet, for whatever reason, we can't judge, we don't know, Allahu A'lam, they believed that whatever that they were doing in this life reached a point where it was no longer viable for them, no longer bearable, and they felt like whatever, even if they're unsure of it, which would be coming after this life, would offer a better option than what they're facing right now. And, that's kind of a wake-up call, I think, for everybody, that it doesn't matter so much the outward things that you think you possess and that you may acquire and that you may come about. Really, it's what have you cultivated inside, right? And we're not talking about, these were, people who lived during the time of the Sahaba only, and or the first pious generations, Salaf al-Salih and the Tabi'een, wa Tabi'een. But actually, we're talking about something that today, people today are living these ahwal and living these maqamat. I've seen people who would be considered destitute by North American standards. They don't own anything. But yet the smile never leaves their face. You never sense that there's this trepidation or anxiety about, where's the next meal going to come from, and how am I going to afford this, and how am I going to pay off this debt, and how am I going to, acquire these things, and none of that. They have this rida, this contentment. They have this generosity of soul. They don't have much, but they're ready to give so much, and easily ready to give. How many are the people who have so much, but they're shuh muta', right? They have this stinginess about them that they just can't unfollow, and it possesses them, and they feel like everything that they possessed, right, came from araq jabinu, came from the sweat of her forehead, and so they're not ready to give it up. That's an indication of a few things. One of them is you don't actually understand the way the universe works. That's the most important thing. لَيْسَ مِنْ عَرَقْ جَبِينَكَ. It's not from the sweat of your forehead that you have what you have. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with those things. It's not because anything that you did, right? Don't be the Qarun archetype in the Quran. إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. Right? إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ. I've been given these things because of my knowledge, my abilities, my skills, my understanding, right? Nafs al-ammara bis-su'. This is the ego that exhorts us to all sorts of iniquity. And one of the worst forms of iniquity that often goes unnoticed is the iniquity of feeling confident in our understanding of how things are. We're so confident, we have so much thiqah and confidence, and we think how the world works and why we have what we have and why we possess what we possess, and it's all due to our skills and our abilities and our own internal attributes and so forth. But the reality is, what about this person who put as much effort as you or more effort than you, but they don't have what you have? How do you explain that? ظروف, his circumstances were different. Okay, but who made the circumstances? Who made the circumstances work in your favor and they didn't work in this other person's favor? Wasn't that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? Allah put you in a place. Yeah, he didn't have good people around him to help build his business or to build his project or to build his enterprise. And so, and so forth. Yeah, but who put all of that together? Who made those surrounding issues and circumstances? Right? Was it not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Imam al-Shafi'i is quoted as saying, Al-Layth afqahu min Malik, which I think is probably misunderstood. We have to say that Layth was a better faqih than Malik, but we don't have madhab al-Layth today. Right? We don't have the madhab of Imam al-Layth Ibn Sa'd, who was one of the great Imams that many of the students of Malik and Shafi'i had studied with before they went and studied with them. Why? Well, it wasn't, what we get from that saying is it wasn't because of his knowledge. His knowledge was sound. His understanding was sound. He could have very easily been one of those four or a fifth madhab of jurisprudence. But it was not to be. Imam al-Tabari also was considered a mujtahid imam. Imam al-Awza'i, al-Sufyanan, right? Sufyan ibn Uyayna and the other Sufyan, also, they were from the mujtahid caliber, but yet their sort of schools of thought did not go on and survive. Why? Their knowledge was sound. Everything about what they did was completely sound. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala كتب الرزق والفلاح لهؤلاء ولم يكتبها لهؤلاء. He wrote it that the success will be for these people. This is what's going to survive and continue. And he didn't write it for this. That's not to take away from the people who didn't have that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala هو الذي يهيئ الظروف. He is the one who puts all of these things into place. We just take it for granted all the time because it's already in place, right, that we kind of had something to do with it when we actually didn't have anything to do with it. And so, when we look at other people who may have put more effort or done more, هذه الأشياء للأعتبار. It's for us to consider and reflect about, and not to say, I am better than. Look at the fruits of the Quran. What did Sahib al-Jannatain, the one of the two gardens in Surah Al-Kahf, he didn't understand how the universe worked. First, he thought that the two gardens that he possessed, Allah couldn't possibly give him something better than that, right? And also, he was muftakhir, right? He said to his friend, whether it was his brother or his cousin or his neighbor, right? I am more than you in wealth and in terms of progeny, and so I am better than you. He saw it as a product of his labor. And so he didn't understand. That's an archetype. Right, just like Qarun is an archetype, the one who believed that everything was because of his own abilities. And then we see the reality of what they are, right? When Allah takes all of that away, in an instant, the earth literally swallowed up Qarun and his entourage and his horses and his chariots and all of the things that he had. And literally overnight, the two gardens were reduced to dust, like they were never there to begin with. So the believer then is going to cultivate these inner states, right? And there are going to be things that can help contribute to that. There's going to be things that will bring you, right, to these realizations. And then when the heart becomes pure and sound as a result, then all of the deeds will be rectified. Why would you have even one, حبة خردل من كبر? Why would you have even one small iota? One of the scholars, he said that the khardal is like, there are 6,000 khardals in 1 gram. So how much kibr is that? How much arrogance, right? That even if one person has this little bit, they may not enter into paradise. هذا حق. هذه حقيقة. This is the reality, right? Because it means you don't understand. There's no reason for you. حتى تتكبر. There's no reason for you to have any level of arrogance, of kibr. There's no justification for it to begin with, despite what you may think that you have, or that you possess, or that you have better than other people. So this book then, from the beginning, Al-Yaqadha, from awakening to Tawheed, kind of goes and shows you how about, what are the pitfalls and what are the things we need to sort of be thinking about to acquire these internal states. In a previous class, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we did some of the beginning of the first 10 chapters. So there's 10 chapters of 10 maqamat in each. And so what I did in the previous one, the first qism or the first section is called al-bidayat. Right? Al-bidayat means the beginnings. So it talks about awakening, yaqadha, and tawbah, right? And repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it has to begin with repentance towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then the other chapters go into other issues. So I'm going to be reading from the second 10 chapters, since we did a little bit of the first. These second 10 chapters are called Qism al-Abwab, or I think it's translated as the gates. So we had bidayat, we had beginnings, and now we have the gateways or the pathways. And these are now saying, how do we enter into the different paths of suluk, right? Of wayfaring towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, what we commonly call emotion or feelings, and a lot of times we're kind of a little dismissive of it. People might just sort of very casually say, you got to do this and don't let your feelings get in the way. Don't let those feelings, you just got to go and do it, and so forth. The deen is not just kind of a marathon of willpower. What I mean by that is we shouldn't have the expectation that I am going to succeed in my willpower, right? The power to will what I want to happen in every single thing that comes up in my life, in every single challenge. And then that's the way it just has to be. I don't believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended it that way for us. We're going to face challenges, and we're going to face difficulties, and we have to overcome things. And it's going to take resolve, it's going to take himmah and fortitude, but also there are things that are just beyond willpower as well, right? There's tajalliyat, there's futuhat, there's taysirat, there's facilitations, there's going to be openings, right? Because when you make it all just about willpower, you are mired and stuck in the ana, in the me. And one of the pitfalls of the tariq, of the suluk, is becoming mired in the me, in the I, right? It's like a quicksand. Once you slip into it, and you struggle to come out of it, but it still goes back to me and I, and so forth. And one of the objectives is to go from ana to huwa. It's to go from the I to the he, with capital H, namely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So rather than the focus being on yourself, the focus will be upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a reorientation, right? So if your compass is facing to the I, you want to reorient it and face it to the he, to the huwa, right? And not be so concerned, right, about the things of the nafs, of the ego. So our emotions then are important. Rather than dismissing them and saying they don't count or they're irrelevant or they get in the way, we should channel them into fueling our himmah, our aspiration, our drive, so that we may get to a closer understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anger in of itself is not necessarily blameworthy. It's the repercussions, it's the consequences of anger, right? And when anger is managed correctly, and let's say it's mawzoon, it's balanced, we call it courage, right? When it's not managed correctly, we call it recklessness, tahawwur. But you need to have some of it in order to meet the challenges you're going to face, right? If it's all about just me and willpower, but you need a little bit of emotional strength to get beyond that, to go towards that. There has to be a little bit of huzn, right? What we may call grief or sadness, but we're not talking about grief or sadness of the awam. We're talking about grief or sadness that can rise to a maqam, right? That can rise to a state. That's a different type. When we talk about, mahabba, and we talk about love, and we talk about and tawakkul and the other places we want to be at, they are kind of have a base in emotions, but they rise up, and so it can be an actual something that informs your spiritual state, because we are informed both by intellect and by spirit. So we shouldn't just kind of throw them all to the side and dismiss them and say that they have no meaning. Why else if they had no meaning, then why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people of feeling and emotion and so forth? It's not just a strict intellectual enterprise right? And everything is just about how I think about it and just make it happen in willpower. There's suluk, right? And there's, there are going to be, sort of a ladder type of thing you're going to go through, and that's perfectly fine and it's okay, right? And so it's making the best of that emotion at the time and fueling it to lead you to a closer relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have 5 minutes? So we only have 5 minutes, what I've been told, but let's just start anyway. So these 10 chapters, which are called the gates, they are going to include الحزن والخوف والإشفاق والخشوع والإخبات والزهد والورع والتبتل والرجاء والرغبة, or grief, fear, concern, reverence, capitulation, renunciation, piety, consecration, hope, and aspiration. Jazakallah khair. Imam al-Munawi says about these, he says, لكل سالك باب منها يغلب على قلبه تكون منه نهضته ودخوله في السلوك فطوبى لمن دخل من جميع الأبواب كالصديق رضي الله عنه. He said, for every salik, for every wayfarer, there is going to be a pathway, a gate that is going to overcome their heart, or will be the dominating gate, so to speak, for their heart. And from this, there will come their nahda, will come their inspiration or their rise to the occasion. وَدُخُولُهُ فِي السُّلُوكِ, and also his entrance, his or her entrance into the path of wayfaring or into the path of suluk. فَطُوبَى لِمَنْ دَخَلَ مِنْ جَمِيعِ الْأَبْوَابِ كَالصِّدِّيقِ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. So glad tidings, good news to the one who can enter from all of the doors, just like as-Siddiq, yani Abu Bakr as-Siddiq رضي الله عنه. So as-Siddiqiyya is considered to be the highest maqam for non-prophets, which is all that we can aspire to. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq had all of these aspects, right? What did the Prophet ﷺ say about him to the rest of the Sahaba? He said, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq has not been preferred over the rest of you because of extra prayers or fasting that he would do, وَلَكِنْ لِشَيْءٍ وَقَرَ فِي صَدْرِهِ, but rather because of something that stirred within his heart. Something that stirred within his heart. So, rather than start now and then have to stop, we'll just stop here for the night, and tomorrow we will have a session, I believe, from 6 to 8, as well as Sunday, and we'll go over some of these things, and this was meant sort of as an introduction, inshallah. وجزاكم الله خير والحمد لله رب العالمين.